It had been a quiet move for Sarah and her younger brother Daniyal into their late grandmother's old countryside house. After their parents passed away in a tragic accident, the siblings were left with the eerie, creaking wooden home tucked away at the edge of a misty forest. The village nearby was nearly abandoned, and the neighbors they did see kept their distance. Sarah, at 22, had taken on the role of guardian. Daniyal, only 12, was still a child with wide eyes and endless curiosity. The house was large, dusty, and full of old furniture wrapped in white sheets, giving it the feel of a place long forgotten by time. Daniyal was fascinated by it all. He ran up and down the stairs, peeking behind doors, tapping on the walls like he expected something to answer back. Sarah, on the other hand, felt an unease that only grew stronger with each passing hour. She didn't like how quiet the place was. Not peaceful quiet, but the kind that presses on your ears, like the silence is listening. It was late afternoon when Daniyal called her from the top of the stairs. "Sarah, come see what I found." She climbed up to the attic, the air colder there than the rest of the house, heavy with dust and time. Daniyal was kneeling beside a wooden box, the lid open. He held something in his hands. It was a porcelain doll. She wore a torn red dress, her pale ceramic skin cracked on one cheek. Her green glass eyes glinted even in the low light, and for a brief moment Sarah could have sworn they moved. She flinched and took a step back. "I don't like dolls," she said quickly, arms folding tightly across her chest. "Put it back." "But she blinked," Daniyal whispered, his eyes locked on the dolls. Sarah forced a laugh, though her stomach twisted. "It's probably the light. Let's get out of the attic. There's so much dust, you'll catch a cold." That night, as Sarah finished cleaning the kitchen, she passed Daniyal's room and peeked in. The doll sat neatly on his shelf, watching the room with her cracked smile. Sarah shook her head and turned off the light. At 3 a.m., Daniyal's scream ripped through the house. Sarah jumped out of bed, heart pounding, and ran to his room. She found him sitting up in bed, drenched in sweat, staring at the doll now sitting on the floor directly in front of him. "She was whispering to me," he said, voice trembling. "She said my name. She said she wanted to play." Sarah picked up the doll, shivering at the coldness of its surface. She carried it into the hallway and placed it inside a cardboard box, taping it shut and locking it in the attic. The next day was heavy with tension. Daniyal seemed quiet, subdued, his eyes constantly darting toward the ceiling. Sarah tried to distract him with breakfast and cartoons, but he barely responded. She told herself he'd had a nightmare. Kids did that. It didn't mean anything. That night, she double-checked that the doll was still in the attic. It was taped and boxed, before heading to bed. But just as she began to drift into sleep, a soft whisper broke through the silence. "Daniyal?" She sat up straight. The voice hadn't come from Daniyal's room. It had come from hers. She turned on the light and looked around. Nothing. She stepped into the hallway. Daniyal's door was ajar. Inside, he was asleep. The doll was on his bedside table again. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't brought it down. Daniyal hadn't gone upstairs. Yet here it was. As she stared at the doll, its head tilted ever so slightly, and she could almost hear it again. Faint, distant, but there. "Come play." Sarah didn't sleep the rest of the night. Something was wrong. Something had come with that doll, and it didn't want to leave. Sarah spent the next morning searching online, digging through local forums and archived articles about the house and the surrounding area. The name Elena kept coming up. A girl who had lived in the same house decades ago. A girl who had vanished. According to one post, she had been seen carrying a doll that matched the one Daniyal had found. The stories were fragmented, local folklore, urban legends, but the core remained the same. Elena disappeared after her parents were found dead in the basement. No suspects, no evidence. Just the broken body of a family and whispers of a cursed doll. Sarah didn't want to believe it, but the events of the last 2 nights left her shaken. She tried to act normal around Daniyal, but the boy wasn't the same. He sat silently at breakfast, eyes dull, moving his food around the plate without eating. That afternoon, she found pages of his notebook covered in strange symbols and drawings. Every page was the same. A childlike figure next to a tall, smiling doll with wide eyes and claws for hands. She asked him about it gently. Daniyal didn't look up. She said, "I have to draw. She likes it when I draw her." Sarah's blood ran cold. She took the doll again, and this time burned it in the backyard fire pit, staying to watch until the porcelain cracked and turned black from the heat. She poured water over the ashes, burying what was left under a pile of stones. Then she took Daniyal to a nearby motel for the night. For a while, it seemed to help. Daniyal even laughed at breakfast the next morning, something he hadn't done in days. But when they returned home, Sarah's heart sank. There, on the front porch, sat the doll, not burned, not cracked, perfect, smiling, red-dressed, with its green eyes gleaming in the sun. Sarah screamed and stumbled backward, dragging Daniyal inside and locking every door. She didn't know what else to do. Her hands shaking, she called a local church and begged for help. A soft-spoken priest named Father Elias agreed to come by that evening. When he arrived, the house reacted. As he stepped onto the porch, the wind picked up. Clouds rolled in suddenly, turning the sky a deep gray. The front door creaked open on its own. Sarah apologized, terrified, and led him inside. The moment he stepped into the hallway, every light flickered. The air turned cold enough to see their breath. Father Elias looked up toward the attic door. "It's here," he whispered. They climbed the stairs together. Daniyal followed, though Sarah told him to wait. The doll was already sitting at the top step facing them. Father Elias didn't flinch. He picked it up carefully, wrapped it in a cloth, and began to murmur prayers under his breath. As he did, Daniyal's voice changed. "She's angry," he said, voice deeper, older than a 12-year-old's. "She doesn't want to leave." The boy's body jerked suddenly. He dropped to his knees, clutching his head. Sarah rushed to him, but he shoved her away with unnatural strength. His eyes rolled back and he began to speak in tongues. Father Elias continued, louder now, sweat pouring from his brow. The cloth around the doll began to darken, as if bleeding. Then the walls of the attic shook. The lights exploded. Daniyal screamed in agony. With a final shout, the priest held up a crucifix and pressed it against the doll's face. A sharp crack echoed through the attic. The doll split in two. Daniyal collapsed. Silence. Sarah crawled to her brother and held him close. He was breathing. The priest was pale but alive. The doll lay shattered on the floor, its eyes no longer glowing. Over the next few weeks, things began to feel normal again. Daniyal recovered slowly, though he rarely spoke about what happened. Sarah cleaned the house, removed the furniture, and even made plans to sell it. The past, she thought, was behind them. But on a rainy night just before they were set to leave, Sarah passed the attic stairs. Something made her stop. A sound, faint, a whisper. "Sarah, come play." She stood frozen. The attic door creaked open, and on the step sat the doll, whole, smiling, waiting.